Welcome back, Deep Divers. Today we're going to dive into the world of the new NASA Administrator, Jared Isaacman.
Oh, wow.
And trust me, this is gonna be an interesting one. He's not exactly your typical appointee.
Yeah, definitely a fascinating departure from the norm.
So where do we even begin with this guy? Dropping out of high school at 16 to start a payment processing company in his parents' basement.
Bold move.
Bold move.
Right. And that company, Shift4 Payments, it's a global player now, processing billions of dollars annually. Safe to say that move paid off.
It did.
Yeah.
It did. But then we get to the really interesting stuff, right? This guy's obsession with space. It's next level. He didn't just dream about it. He funded and commanded the first all-civilian mission to space, Inspiration 4.
Yeah, Inspiration 4, it was really a watershed moment. I mean, it really captured the imagination of people all over the world, and it demonstrated the potential of private space travel in a way we really hadn't seen before. But Isaacman didn't stop there.
Of course not.
He also participated in the Polaris program, a series of private space missions with SpaceX, which included a record-breaking spacewalk, the first for a private citizen.
That's incredible. But wait, there's more. He also set a world record for circumnavigating the globe in a light jet and co-founded Draken International, which trains U.S. Air Force pilots. This guy is clearly driven to push boundaries, everything he does.
Absolutely. And now he's been appointed to lead NASA.
Yeah.
This raises so many questions about the future of the agency and what his leadership will mean for space exploration.
So tell me, how does Isaacman's background prepare him to take on a role as massive and complex as leading NASA?
Well, on one hand, he doesn't really fit the traditional mold of a NASA administrator. I mean, we've historically seen leaders who've come up through the ranks of, government, academia. Isaacman comes from the world of entrepreneurship and private enterprise. That in itself represents a major shift in thinking.
So is this a good thing or a bad thing? I mean, does his experience actually translate into the skills needed to lead NASA?
It's a complex question. There's no easy answer. There are certainly potential benefits. His experience in the private sector suggests he may bring a fresh perspective to the agency, a focus on efficiency, innovation, and perhaps a more agile approach to problem solving.
That makes sense. He's used to operating in a fast-paced, results-oriented environment. But NASA is a huge organization. It's a bureaucratic organization with established procedures, deeply ingrained culture. Can he adapt to that?
Yeah, that is one of the big questions. Another potential benefit is his understanding of the new space economy. It's characterized by increasing collaboration between, government agencies like NASA and private companies like SpaceX, Blue Origin, Virgin Galactic. He's already demonstrated a willingness to embrace this trend with Inspiration 4 and Polaris. His appointment could signal a more pronounced shift in that direction.
So potentially a more entrepreneurial and collaborative approach to space exploration. What about the potential downsides?
Well, there are certainly concerns. Some worry that his lack of government experience could make it difficult for him to navigate the complex political landscape in Washington. I mean, NASA's funding and priorities are ultimately determined by Congress and the White House. Can he effectively advocate for his vision and build consensus among stakeholders with potentially differing priorities?
That's a great point. You need to be politically savvy to operate in that environment.
Huh.
What other concerns are people raising?
Well, his close ties to Elon Musk and SpaceX are also raising eyebrows.
Uh-huh.
Some people worry this could lead to conflicts of interest, preferential treatment for SpaceX over other companies.
That's a valid concern. How can he ensure that he's perceived as fair and impartial?
Transparency will be key. He'll need to be very careful to avoid even the appearance of favoritism. He'll need to demonstrate that he's acting in the best interests of NASA and the nation as a whole, not just promoting the interests of his former business associates.
So we've got this, incredibly accomplished individual with a very unique background stepping into a complex and demanding role.
Yeah.
It seems like there are valid arguments on both sides about whether this is a positive development. What, in your opinion, are some of the key things to watch for as Isaacman takes the helm at NASA?
Well, that's a great question. There are several things I'll be paying close attention to. First, how will he approach NASA's budget? Will he seek to increase funding for commercial partnerships or focus on strengthening NASA's internal capabilities? Will he prioritize human spaceflight or scientific research? And perhaps most importantly, how will he address concerns about about potential conflicts of interest. His actions in these areas will reveal a lot about his vision for the agency and the future of space exploration.
This is already shaping up to be a fascinating chapter in the history of NASA.
Yeah.
But before we, speculate about the future, let's delve a little deeper into Isaacman's background.
Sounds good to me.
All right, then, let's rewind the clock a bit. He dropped out of high school at 16, started a company in his parents' basement. I mean, that's the story in itself. What can we learn about him from those early years?
Well, it definitely suggests a remarkable level of self-belief, and an entrepreneurial drive that's pretty rare. To forego the traditional path of education and jump headfirst into starting a business takes guts and a vision that most 16-year-olds just don't have.
So even back then, he was a risk taker.
Yeah.
With a clear goal in mind.
Absolutely. And the success of Shift4 Payments shows he wasn't just reckless. He had the business acumen to back it up. I mean, building a company from scratch, especially in a complex field like payment processing, it requires not just a great idea, but also the ability to execute, to build a team, to navigate challenges, market forces. Those are skills that could certainly be valuable at NASA.
That's a really good point. Okay, so we see this entrepreneurial spirit from a young age, but then there's this whole other side to him, right? The adventurer, the pilot, the space enthusiast. It almost seems like two different personalities.
Yeah.
How do those two sides connect?
I think they're actually very much intertwined. His passion for aviation and space is clearly a driving force in his life. But even there, we see that same entrepreneurial spirit. He didn't just wait for opportunities to come his way. He created them. He didn't just dream of going to space. He funded and led the first all-civilian mission. He set world records. He co-founded a company that trains fighter pilots. This is someone who identifies a goal and then finds a way to make it happen.
So you're saying it's not just about the passion. It's about taking that passion and turning it into concrete action.
Exactly. And that can-do attitude, that ability to think big and then actually execute on those ambitious goals could be incredibly valuable at NASA. I mean, the agency is facing some huge challenges: declining budgets, increasing competition from other nations, the need to develop new technologies to explore deeper into space. Someone like Isaacman, who is used to pushing boundaries, overcoming obstacles, might be just what NASA needs to navigate these turbulent times.
I see what you mean. But there's also a risk, isn't there, that entrepreneurial spirit could be disruptive in a government agency. NASA has a long history, a culture built on meticulous planning, risk aversion, incremental progress. Someone who's used to moving fast and breaking things might clash with that culture.
Yeah, it's a valid concern. There could be a culture clash, but it could also be an opportunity for positive change. Maybe NASA needs a bit of a shakeup, a fresh perspective to break out of its traditional modes of thinking. Maybe a leader who isn't afraid to take risks and challenge the status quo is exactly what's needed to propel the agency into a new era of space exploration.
Okay, so let's say Isaacman can navigate the potential cultural challenges. What are some of the specific things he might do to bring that entrepreneurial spirit to NASA? How might his leadership actually manifest itself in policy or programs?
That's where it gets really interesting. We know he's talked about making space more accessible, but what does that look like in practice?
Yeah, what are the concrete steps he might take to achieve that?
One area where he could make a real impact is by pushing for the development of new, more affordable launch systems.
Yeah.
Right now, the cost of getting to space is a major barrier to entry. But with the rise of reusable rockets and advancements in technology, there's a real opportunity to bring those costs down significantly. Isaacman could use his position to incentivize the private sector to develop these new technologies, perhaps through public-private partnerships or by setting ambitious goals for NASA's own launch program.
That would be a game changer. Imagine if space travel became accessible to not just billionaires and astronauts, but to the scientists, researchers, artists, maybe even regular people like you and me.
Exactly. It would be a whole new era of exploration and discovery. And it's a vision that Isaacman, with his experience in commercial spaceflight and his drive to push boundaries, seems uniquely positioned to pursue.
Okay, so he could focus on making space travel more affordable. What other changes might we see under his leadership?
Another area where he could make a mark is in how NASA approaches human spaceflight missions. Traditionally, NASA has focused on long-duration missions to low Earth orbit and beyond with highly trained astronauts. But with the emergence of commercial spaceflight, there's potential to open space to a wider range of participants and for shorter, more targeted missions.
So maybe we'll see more missions focused on specific scientific goals
Yeah.
or commercial ventures.
Exactly. Imagine a team of researchers spending a week in orbit conducting experiments, or a group of artists creating art in microgravity. Isaacman's background suggests he might be very open to these kinds of innovative approaches.
That would be incredible.
Yeah.
It's really exciting to think about all the possibilities. But let's not forget about the elephant in the room, his close ties to Elon Musk and SpaceX. How do you see that relationship playing out under his leadership?
It's one of the most talked about aspects of his appointment, and rightfully so. It's hard to imagine that his relationship with Musk won't have some impact on NASA's decisions, especially when it comes to partnerships and contracts.
You're right. That relationship will be under a microscope. So what are some of the potential implications on the positive side? Could this close connection with SpaceX lead to accelerated progress in space exploration?
Absolutely. SpaceX is already developing innovative technologies at a rapid pace, including Starship, their fully reusable spacecraft designed for deep space missions. It's conceivable that Isaacman could leverage this existing relationship to accelerate the development and utilization of Starship for missions to the moon, Mars, and beyond.
That would be a major win, potentially saving taxpayers billions of dollars and advancing our exploration efforts significantly. But what about the potential downsides? What are some of the risks associated with this close relationship?
Well, the biggest concern is the perception of favoritism. Isaacman will need to be extremely careful to avoid any appearance of giving SpaceX preferential treatment. He'll need to demonstrate that he's evaluating all options fairly and making decisions based on what's best for NASA and the nation as a whole, not just what benefits SpaceX.
Transparency and accountability will be absolutely crucial. Any whiff of impropriety could erode public trust and undermine his leadership.
You hit the nail on the head. It's a delicate balancing act. He needs to leverage his existing relationships to benefit NASA, but he also needs to maintain a clear separation between his personal connections and his responsibilities as NASA administrator.
It's a fascinating situation with both tremendous potential and significant risk. It's going to be incredibly interesting to see how it all plays out. But before we wrap up, I think it's important to take a step back and look at this appointment from a broader societal perspective.
You're right. It's not just about space exploration. This is a reflection of a larger trend we're seeing across many sectors. The increasing involvement of private enterprise in areas that were once the exclusive domain of government.
I'm curious to hear your thoughts on this. What are the potential implications of this shift?
Well, it's a complex issue with no easy answers. There are potential benefits, of course. Private companies are often more agile, more innovative than government agencies. They're driven by competition and the need to deliver results. This can lead to rapid advancements in technology, more efficient use of resources.
So in theory, we could see faster progress and more cost-effective solutions in areas like space exploration, healthcare, education, transportation.
Exactly. But there are also potential downsides. One concern is that private companies are primarily motivated by profit, which may not always align with the public good.
Right. So there's a risk that essential services could become less accessible,
Hmm.
or that ethical considerations might take a back seat to the bottom line.
That's a valid concern. And then there's the issue of accountability. When private companies take on roles that were traditionally held by government, who is
Yeah.
ultimately responsible for ensuring that things are done ethically and in the best interests of the public.
These are tough questions.
Yeah.
With no easy answers. And it seems Isaacman's appointment at NASA is putting these questions front and center. His leadership could provide valuable insights into how this evolving relationship between government and the private sector will play out in the years to come.
Absolutely. His every decision will be scrutinized, not just for its impact on space exploration, but also for what it says about the changing role of government in a world where private enterprise is playing an increasingly prominent role.
It's a fascinating and complex issue with huge implications for our future. But it is fascinating. And, as we've been talking about Isaacman and his vision for NASA, one thing keeps coming back to me. His own experience as the commander of Inspiration 4.
Oh, interesting. Why do you think that is?
Well, think about it. Here's a guy who had this lifelong dream of going to space. And instead of waiting for NASA or some other government agency to make it happen, He took matters into his own hands. He financed the mission, trained for it, and then actually led a crew of ordinary people into orbit. It's like the ultimate entrepreneurial space venture.
That's a great point. Inspiration 4 wasn't just, a publicity stunt. It was a proof of concept. It
Right.
showed that private citizens, not just professional astronauts, could journey into space. And that experience, that hands-on knowledge of what it takes to make spaceflight happen outside of the traditional government-led model could be incredibly valuable as he leads NASA.
Exactly. He's not just a theorist. He's lived it. He understands the challenges and the opportunities of private spaceflight in a way that few others do.
And that perspective could be transformative for NASA. It could lead to a more entrepreneurial approach, a greater willingness to embrace risk and innovation, a more collaborative relationship with the private sector.
So if we connect this back to his appointment, is it possible that Isaacman sees his role as NASA administrator as an extension of
Yeah.
what he started with Inspiration 4?
Yeah.
A way to make space accessible to more people, to accelerate progress in space exploration, and to usher in a new era of private space ventures.
I think that's a very real possibility, and it's incredibly exciting to consider what that might mean for the future of space exploration. Imagine a world where traveling to space is no longer the exclusive domain of governments and highly trained astronauts, but something that's within reach for scientists, entrepreneurs, artists, maybe even everyday people like you and me.
Now that's a future I can get behind. But let's be realistic. There are bound to be bumps in the road. What are some of the biggest hurdles you see him facing as he tries to implement his vision for NASA?
Well, as we've discussed, navigating the complex political landscape in Washington will be a major challenge. Securing funding for ambitious new programs, building consensus among stakeholders with diverse priorities, and defending his decisions against inevitable scrutiny. These are all things he'll have to master.
It's a high stakes game
Yeah.
for sure, and the pressure will be immense.
Absolutely. And then there's the whole issue of public perception. His close ties to Elon Musk and SpaceX will be a constant source of contention, and he'll need to be incredibly careful to avoid any actions that could be perceived as favoritism or conflicts of interest.
He needs to be squeaky clean and transparent in every decision he makes.
But even if he manages to navigate those challenges, there's still the bigger question of whether he can successfully bridge the cultural divide between the traditional government-centric approach to space exploration and the more entrepreneurial, private sector-driven model that he seems to favor.
That's the crux of it, isn't it? Can he bring these two worlds together, harnessing the strengths of both to create a new and more dynamic approach to space exploration? Only time will tell.
So as we wrap up our deep dive into the world of Jared Isaacman and his new role as NASA administrator, what's the one big question you think we should all be pondering?
For me, it comes down to this. Will his leadership mark a turning point in the history of space exploration, a shift from government dominance to a more collaborative era where private enterprise plays a leading role? Or will the challenges prove too great, his vision too ambitious, the cultural divide too wide to bridge?
It's a question with no easy answers. But one thing is for sure, it's going to be a fascinating journey to watch unfold.
Absolutely. And we'll be here to break it all down for you along the way.
So be sure to like, share, comment, and subscribe to The Deep Dive for more fascinating explorations of the world around us. Until next time, keep diving deep.